The humanoid species that would become the Necrons began their existence under a fearsome, scourging star in the far reaches of the galaxy, known as the Halo Stars region. Billions of standard years before humanity evolved on Terra, assailed at every moment by solar winds and intense radiation storms, the flesh and blood species known as the Necrontyr became a morbid people whose precarious lifespans were riven by constant loss. What little information the Imperium of Man has recovered on the Necrontyr tells that their lives were short and uncertain, their bodies blighted and consumed at an early age by the terrible cancers and other illnesses linked to the high levels of ionizing radiation given off by their sun. Necrontyr cities were built in anticipation of their inhabitants' early demise, as the living were only brief residents scratching their daily livelihoods in the shadow of the vast sepulchres and tombs of their ancestors. Likewise, their ruling dynasties were founded on the anticipation of an early death, and the living were thought of as no more than temporary residents hurrying through the more permanent and lasting structures raised to honor the dead. On the Necrontyr homeworld, the greatest monuments were always built for the dead, never the living. Driven by necessity, the Necrontyr escaped their crucible prison and struck out for the stars, hopeful of carving out an empire in which they could realize their species' freedom from the lethal energies of their birth star. Using stasis crypts and slow-moving, antimatter-powered torch ships that were clad in the living metal known as necrodermis to resist the millennia-long journeys through the void, the Necrontyr began to colonize distant worlds. Little by little, the Necrontyr dynasties spread ever further until much of the ancient galaxy answered to their rule. From the earliest days, the rulers of individual Necrontyr dynasties were themselves governed by the Triarch, a council composed of 3 Necron dynasty monarchs known as Pharaons. The head of the Triarch was known as the Silent King, for he addressed his subjects only through the other 2 Pharaons who ruled alongside him. Nominally a hereditary position, the uncertain lifespans of the Necrontyr ensured that the title of Silent King nonetheless passed from one royal dynasty to another many times. The final days of the Necrontyr Empire occurred in the reign of Shorek, the last of the Silent Kings. Sometime during their slow interstellar expansion, the Necrontyr encountered an ancient species far older than any other in existence in the known galaxy. These beings were the Old Ones, and they were absolute masters of forms of energy the Necrontyr could not even conceive of, yet alone wield. The Old Ones had long ago conquered the secrets of immortality, yet they refused to share the gift of eternal life with the Necrontyr, who yet bore the genetic curse of the bitter star they had been born under. The colonization of much of the galaxy by the reptilian mystics had been immeasurably swifter and more expansive than that of the Necrontyr because of their warp gates and mastery of the immaterium. That and the Old Ones' incredibly long, if not downright immortal lifespans, kindled a burning jealous rage in the Necrontyr, which ate at their culture spiritually as much as physical cancers consumed their bodies. The Necrontyr were astonished to learn that another intelligent species enjoyed such long lives while their own were cut so brutally short. But as time wore on, further strife came to the Necrontyr. Each dynasty sought to claim its own destiny, and soon the great houses were engaged in all-out conflicts known as the Wars of Secession. Had circumstances remained as they were for but a generation more, it is possible that the Necrontyr would have wiped themselves out, as so many species had before them and shall do in the future. As their territory grew ever wider and more diverse, the unity that had made them strong was eroded, and bitter wars were waged as entire realms fought to win independence. Ultimately, the Triarch realized that the only hope of unity for their people lay in conflict with an external enemy. But there were few who could prove a credible threat to the technologically advanced Necrontyr. Only the Old Ones were a prospective foe powerful enough to bind the feuding Necrontyr dynasties to a common cause. Such a war was simplicity itself to justify, for the Necrontyr had ever rankled at the Old Ones' refusal to share the secrets of eternal life. So it was that Sharik, the last of the Silent Kings, in a typically bitter act of jealousy and resentment for the Necrontyr race, declared war on the Old Ones. At the same time, he offered amnesty to any secessionist Necrontyr dynasties who willingly returned to the fold of the Triarch. Thus lured by the spoils of victory and the promise of immortality, the separatist Necrontyr realms abandoned their Wars of Secession, and what was later known as the War in Heaven began. A conflict unlike any fought before erupted across the stars. Yet while the Silent King and the Triarch had succeeded in uniting their hateful people, it was a war the Necrontyr could not win, not on their own.